Hola mi gente, MsMalcolmHughes here, back with a book review. And today we're gonna talk about a doozy of a book. So we have the Love Songs of W.E.B Du Bois by Honoree Fanonne Jeffers. Look just at the velocity of this book. Just look at the depth of it. It's actually not the longest book I've ever read, but it's the longest one I've read in a while. So just want to get it out of the way soon that like this one has a lot of pages. Is it worth the read? We'll talk about it. Let's first get into what it's about. The great scholar W.E.B. Du Bois once wrote about the problem of race in America and what he called double consciousness, a sensitivity that every African American possesses in order to survive. Since childhood, Ailey Pearl Garfield has understood Du Bois's words all too well. Bearing the names of two formidable Black Americans, the revered choreographer Alvin Ailey and her great-grandmother Pearl, the descendant of enslaved Georgians and tenant farmers, Ailey carries Du Bois's problem on her shoulders. Ailey is reared in the North, in the city, but spends summers in the small Georgia town of Chickasetta, where her mother's family has lived since their ancestors arrived from Africa in bondage. Since she was a child, Ailey has fought a battle for belonging that is made all the more difficult by hovering trauma and the whispers of women, her mother Belle, her sister Lydia, and a maternal line reaching back 2 centuries, who urge Ailey to succeed in their stead. To come to terms with her own identity, Ailey embarks on a journey through her family's past, uncovering the shocking tales of generations of ancestors, indigenous, Black and white, in the Deep South. Along the way, Ailey must learn to embrace her full heritage, a legacy of oppression and resistance, bondage and independence, cruelty and resilience that is the story and the song of America itself. So that overview hopefully gave y'all a lot to understand. I think the description is valid. I think that when I think of this book, I think of multi-generational trauma, cross-generational trauma. We do follow our protagonist Ailey, but we follow more than just her. This is not a linear story by any means. It goes back and forth through history. At one point in time, we are in many years ago, then we pop to not so long ago, then we hop to the present. So we get to know Ailey through her family, through her lineage. We get to go back to the times of enslavement. We get to go and understand just how everything impacts the human that she is today. I will say that there are so many rich and robust characters in this book that you just become enamored with. Ailey herself is a character that I rooted for from the very beginning. We do encounter so many other characters. We have her sister, Lydia, which I know a lot of people were deeply invested in that storyline. Her sister and her are like so many other siblings in reality, very different, coming from the same household. She has actually two sisters, or 3 of them in total. But we get a lot of information on Lydia. And they just grew up to be very different people, but having endured a lot of the same trauma. But they took different paths, and I won't give it away, but her sister struggles with her own challenges. Ailey herself has her own challenges. The thing that made this book interesting for me is that there's so much here, right? Again, so much here just to get through. But at one point in time, I found myself really just wanting to come back to the present. I was more invested in the present times, with the understanding that the past times were important as well. I myself was deeply invested in the present, deeply enjoyed Ailey's relationship with her uncle, deeply enjoyed her college experience, and just the challenges that she faced. I think that our author here does a really good job of weaving together challenges in a way that is very natural. There's a lot of trauma here. A lot of trauma. A lot of sexual abuse. A lot of sexual abuse that happens to children. So that in and of itself is very challenging to read. And I won't say that it's done in a way that wasn't necessary. I think you get the full understanding of it. You know exactly what was happening. It's still unsettling as it should be, but it's not impossible to read. And I think that was crucial, because I think sometimes it can be so unbearable that you cannot continue with a text. And that doesn't happen here, so you get to continue and you get to experience the rest of the wonder of this work. I would say that the way that this book is written is in a style that captures you like immediately, and it really does hold you, and it keeps you so much that sometimes it does feel as if you are reading about your own family, or that it's more you're listening to a conversation about someone else's family, and you're just so engrossed in the text. So that is really well done. There's so many topics here, as the synopsis kind of tells us. It does go over the history of America in general, the history. We do follow this African-American family, so we get that as well. And there's so many topics that are covered, as I noted earlier. Topics of racism, sexism, classism, colorism. There's just so much here that it touches on so much, but it's not done in a way that feels chaotic. So I think that is what makes it such a literary success, is that it does not feel chaotic. It feels very well thread. Even though she does what feels like an impossible feat of jumping in and out of a timeline, but still making it make sense, and it's still being fluid enough. I would say some other works that I've read that tried to do this, you often were confused, like, wait, what was happening? Who is this? And there can be some of that here, but I don't feel like it happened as much. And I think more often than not, I knew exactly what I was hopping into, and I knew who the characters were, and I remembered their storyline. So that was very well done. Another thing I loved about this book, you've heard me talk about so many characters. It is very character driven, which is something that I love. I love literary fiction for that. I love to follow characters and their growth and development, and we have that here, especially with Ailey, honestly with a lot of other people, but that storyline. Now with that being said, there are some characters where their story just kind of abruptly stops, and sometimes the author will tell us like, hey, we're not going to tell you what happens here. Here's some other things that have happened around that time. This could be connected, it cannot. You draw your own conclusions. And though that is sometimes frustrating, it is still very tantalizing, and you want to continue to read. And honestly, sometimes you hope that maybe they'll come back up again. I do love here, because it is following this Black family, there's so many Black cultural gems that are dropped. Obviously the book itself is titled The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. So W.E.B. Du Bois is such a critical figure throughout this entire book. I love that. I think that throughout the Black community, we talk about Du Bois so much. I think he's given, like he gave us and still gives us, even in his transcendence and ancestorhood, I think he still offers us so much in what he's written and his works, and just thought-provoking philosophies for us to go back and still study, and even just like plans for the Black community that have still not been enacted, that we can go back and figure out what works and what didn't, and what has never been tried, and how we could use it today. So I think that having him as a thread throughout this book was so important. To really anchor our chapters was a great just framing. Obviously other people have done that, but I think this was well done. It didn't, just because it's been done by others doesn't mean it isn't done well here. I think also the conversation or the argument here that kind of anchors things too, and just in the Black community, you'll hear it all the time. W.E.B. Du Bois versus Booker T. Washington. We have that here. There were also so many just other cultural gems that you could find when you're reading, especially if you knew. One that I greatly enjoyed was Love Jones, when someone said, I'm gonna break it down so that it is forever been broke. That made me smile and laugh. So there are still moments of joy, even though there's so much heaviness and trauma here. Now, I've raved on this book a lot. There's a lot to rave about, honestly. I think that seeing how everything from the past impacts the present was so well done, because none of us Not a single person is an exception of the past of your ancestors and what has happened before you. It impacts you today, whether you know it or not. And we see that here. So many things that are happening now, so much transgenerational trauma is due to what has happened so many years ago. You may not even know why you do something, but there are actions that occur in the past that are impacting what's happening today. So there's a book that I appreciate. I haven't finished it because I found myself a bit frustrated because I think that people don't choose to focus on the Black American experience enough when talking about trauma and generational trauma. I don't think they focus on it enough, and it wasn't being included in this book, and it frustrated me. But I will return to it, and the title of it is It Didn't Start With You. And it is a psychologist looking at generational trauma and the impact that it has on the descendants, and how actions of our ancestors or things that occur that had nothing to do with us still impact us today. And we see that here. So well done. Again, so many brave things to say. Let's talk about something that frustrated me a bit. I think our main character, Ailey. So a lot of people say Ailey is messy. I disagree with that. I don't think she's messy. And like reflecting upon this work, I was like, why do so many people keep saying she's messy? I can see why she's messy, right? At one point, she's sleeping with a married man. There are other challenges that come up as far as identity. But I think that when you have a young woman who is trying to find herself, who has experienced such trauma at the hands of family members and people who she was supposed to be able to trust and have her best interest, I don't think she was that much of a mess. I think she did things. I think that she did things that were kind of appropriate in her discovering herself, considering the amount of trauma that she had. And maybe that makes her a mess, but not messy. Like, I think that you could say she was a mess, but I don't think she was a messy character. I don't think she intentionally went and wanted to do things that were harmful. I think that, you know, sometimes what you're attracted to, or what you're often attracted to, has a lot to do with trauma or unhealed trauma and experiences that you've had. So was she a bit of a mess? Yes. Was she messy? I would argue no. But I do think that for her to have been our protagonist and who we follow through this journey, I wish she would have spoken up more. There are certain things that I wanted to see here. There's so much trauma here that I think certain things needed to come to a head. And maybe that wasn't the intent. And that doesn't always happen in life, right? Some people don't unload or unburden that trauma. They carry it with them forever in order to protect other people. And I really, really, really wished that that didn't happen here. But it did. Unfortunately, it did. So that was one thing that really like stuck with me and struck me. I was like, I just wish that that didn't happen here. But it did, and it's not unrealistic. Does that take away from the book overall? No. It is just a lingering desire that I still have for this work. So with all of that being said, would I recommend you read this heft of a book? The answer is yes. I don't regret reading it by any means. I'm glad that I read it. This might be one of the works that, you know, you wish you could read again for the first time. I thought it was really well done. And I thought that it was such a success. I thought that Honoree achieved such a feat in the way in which this book was put together, how she was just able to go in and out of time, thread so much trauma, bring us such well-developed characters who you remember, they stand out on their own, they stick with you, many lessons, but even through all the pain, you still get laughs, you still learn, right? It's encouraging, and just watching Ailey find herself and her career, we learn more about like being a historian and documenting why that matters, knowing your roots, knowing your story. I think that it was so well done. So I absolutely recommend reading this book. If I had to rank this book on a scale of read now, read when you have the time, or read if you want, read it now. It's worth it. As you can see by the sticker, Oprah's Book Club picked it up. If you are on Instagram, it's all over there. I'm pretty sure it's all over YouTube as well. You can't get away from this book, and you shouldn't. I recommend that we all read it. So y'all, that's it. A video will be coming soon telling you all the books that I'm reading right now. So I hope that you all check it out and that you find some books that you are interested in, or if you've read them, talk to me about them. If you've read the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, I would love to know your thoughts. So please, please, please drop them in the comments below. Until next time, I'm MsMalcolmHughes, one who believes that books are sometimes better than people. And I hope that you all remember to give time, to be kind to each other, and to have the best day of your life on purpose. Adabo, adios, ciao. Also, for those of you inquiring, I do still have buttons, my Ms. Malcolm Hughes pins, and the details on how to get those are below.